Welcome to the Awaken Your Potential podcast, a series of conscious discussions and guided meditations on topics of awakening, healing, purification, ascension, and personal transformation. Please do enjoy.
You can't fake that. You can know the intellectual concept, but you can't fake really what you feel. And I feel until you heal the inner child or the wounded part of you, then it's only going to be an intellectual understanding until you can heal that and like line those two up.
It's true, 100%. Because then it just keeps playing, and you almost trick yourself into thinking things are fine.
Right.
And then life will present you with the not fine.
Yeah. I mean, the bubble will always burst.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a common thing also with like law of attraction teachings or even success teachings and self-development stuff is just guard your mind. Be positive all the time. Positive. And I notice it, and I think it's a little bit it's not practical. It's not because it's not like, if this heat dish got like too hot, we can't just go like, okay, no, it's not hot. It's like at some point you gotta address that it's hot and like turn it down. There's that old saying of like what you resist persists, right? Whereas if you just look at it and like just have compassion towards it, it naturally like melts and rests.
It's true, always. It's so simple, really. I mean, like bringing attention to things. That's why I laugh. Like every time I'm doing these different meditations or workshops on these different topics, they're really essentially coming back to the same thing. But there's a beauty, like you said, in the specificity.
Specificity.
Yeah,
there we go.
And the focus, because it just reveals a different layer. But so that trauma one was good. But I mean the father one is nice. You can do it with mother. I mean, that's why I posted a while ago that relationship wheel.
I didn't see that
on Instagram, where it was like the 5 most important relationships, which was like mother, father, sibling, best friend, and romantic or intimate partner.
Okay.
As like archetypes. It could be more than 5 people, but archetypes. Except, mother and father. But So because each of them have like a bit of a different quality, like in regards to like the types of people you interact with. So you can do it with each of those and then come into the trauma elements. Right. Whatever unresolved like energies that are perpetuating in the new relationships.
Okay. Have you written anything on like the mother and or the sibling or any other stuff, or was it primarily the father one?
No, I guess I could. I have a long write up on finishing on like friendship, like the dynamics of friendship, spiritual friendship, just the essence of friendship. So that one's pretty interesting. I haven't seen much on something like that. And then obviously the tantric like sexual energy ones kind of pertain to an intimate partner, but I haven't gone into that one too much. I did one kind of on the mother on Mother's Day, or something about like healing is pretty much like becoming your own mother again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and father too.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like coming back to the.
But healing more because the healing is the feminine aspect of the mother is the one that nurtures.
Yeah, it's the foundation to everything, really.
Yeah.
Like, cause you can go. I feel like you can go without a father more so than you can go without a mother. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like
in what sense? Emotionally?
Well, like say like single parent type vibes.
Yeah.
But I would say that's generalizing. But I would say the mother relationship is most important, at least in the initial years.
Right.
Because of like the breast milk.
Yeah.
The touch, the connection you have with the mother is just so much different than the father. So, obviously everyone will jump on that and go off. But like it's like, well, it's just obvious that is what it is, right?
Yeah, true. And I've heard it both ways, right? Where I mentioned to you earlier is that where like one person's mentioned that if there was gonna be a single parent household, it should be the father, because the father's gonna show you how the world works and the framework and
yeah.
stuff like that. And there is validity to that.
Well, I definitely think a father figure is important.
Yes.
I just think the biological
Right.
element is more important. It's more related to the physical mother,
Yeah.
right? Which, again, there's a lot of trauma there too. But
Yeah, well, I think the foundations are emotions, right? Like, as much as we don't want to address it or we don't want to acknowledge it.
yeah,
Really, the thing that you said in your article, the father, was just emotional intelligence is like the doorway to healing or something like that. And it's true. It's that you could have those, like, that father figure, the role model, and you know how the world works and you operate in a good way, but you're never, at least I think, you're never really gonna be able to be fully at rest if you haven't addressed that emotional aspect and that feminine part that comes with the mother.
yeah,
So-
that's true.
So now that I think about it, I agree with you that it's the mother is more important.
Yeah, or at least just it's like chicken before the egg kind of thing comes,
True.
you know, or I guess like love and wisdom type vibes, you know. Love, yeah, it's the foundation to everything. You could be the smartest person in the world, but if that love isn't there, then it's in essence the patriarchal dominated world we live in, and that program that has just like completely, like, essentially dismantled or destroyed the connection to the feminine or the motherly
Right.
principle, you know, like, you know, in all ways, in every respect.
Yeah.
So that's all what's, you know, naturally healing now, and then that's what's taking leadership. Because if the feminine principle, like listening as the primary, it's kind of like listen more than you speak kind of thing,
Right.
just makes these principles are so ever present everywhere.
Yes.
That just like it's like you, but everywhere has an imbalanced extreme. You could say like you can't really listen too much, but you
Right.
can speak too much.
Right.
But at the same time, there is time to speak and not be silent.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you this as a person who's in the past lacked that self-trust and that rootedness. There is a downside to listening too much, right? Which is
Sure.
not listening to yourself and always looking to that authority of, like, what do they think, so I know what to do, right? Yeah, but I mean, paradoxically, that goes away if you listen to yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like how I healed that was just like, oh, I'm just gonna meditate and listen to my thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm feeling more rooted and I'm feeling more like confident, and I'm like, not really not putting any opinion on a pedestal or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it all comes back to like the two sides of the same coin. Like,
Right.
what is really different than listening and speaking? Because if you're speaking in truth and you're listening in truth, they're kind of one and the same.
Right.
know?
I mean, I think you can attest to this too, because you felt it. Sometimes, a lot of times, you're listening to yourself as you speak,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Whoa, that came out of me. Okay, cool."
Yeah, because it's not you anyways. I mean, or as what you think you are, or whatever. You know.
Yeah.
It's all just kind of a fluid. I mean, again, it's what we were talking about today about the, like, inward, outward symbols, signs.
Yeah.
Or like, because being in the flow is not about like waiting for a sign externally or internally. Because if there's no differentiation between external and internal, in the sense of your hologram also being a part of your anatomy just as much as this body. So like going inwards isn't any different than looking into the hologram, because it's all you're inside all of it.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So that again, that was kind of like this balance of action, non-action, where if you're really listening, you're not just listening to like outward symbols and what others say, nor are you just listening to this inward movement of mind and all that, because you see it all as one. So if someone says something in the right timing of you looking for an answer, and then it's there, just the same as someone, you know, no one says anything, but then it comes from
Right.
And, like a true
and
true
a
place.
light bulb moment and intuition.
Yeah, like an inspiration or something.
Yeah, yeah. I think it comes back to the weight of every action, right? To me, being in flow doesn't mean that you're like waiting in a sign for externally or internally. It just means that every action feels like so light, right? If I want to talk to you, just pick up the phone and talk to you. If I whatever, want to travel, I just there's a natural, effortless doingness. I don't know really what to call it. That just comes from that, where it's the weight of the action doesn't seem as much. You know, it's almost like the opposite of when you're just getting intimate with somebody and you just don't know what to text and you're overthinking and you're like, should I say this? Oh no, this doesn't sound witty enough, you know?
Text game.
Yeah.
It's sub podcast.
Yeah.
Text game.
Yeah, so it's like the opposite end of the spectrum, and I'm saying this because I'm recalling one of let's call it a friend who was asking me these questions. Oh, what should I text this person? What should this? And my response was like, what to say. You're just overthinking this because of 1, 2, and 3. And then after that conversation, I just realized that it's the opposite end of the spectrum of like every action just being, just doing it as you're doing it.
Yeah, it's happening on its own. Almost. Yeah, I feel that. It really can be so natural. It's kind of comes back to that trauma programming where like everything is so like difficult, life's so difficult. So then if things don't feel difficult,
right,
it's like, oh, I must not deserve it.
Yeah, it's weird. And dude, this is part of my immigrant programming of work-wise.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I gotta feel that I'm going to this person, and it's like, and then every now and then I'll chat with a few friends who are just like, who have made it in a sense of like money is not an option anymore, and they've got they're thinking in terms of like generational wealth and all that kind of stuff. And when I talk to them about their day, they're like, yeah, well, I wake up and I check up my phone and things like that, and I'm just like, oh, you don't have this like morning routine and seeing this person like this and then cramming your schedule and all that kind of stuff. It's like, no, I work for a couple hours a day. And it's funny, to this day, every time I hear that, it still blows my mind, right? Because that grind is so sort of like rooted. But even just hearing those possibilities is just healing to me.
It's true, yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess when you zoom out and you look at like the timeline of these individuals, or because I can relate to that too, it's like they've been at it for so long, so they've probably gone through so many of those lessons too, where like effort turns to effortlessness, but
right,
because that's it. It's like struggle. When I mean like difficult and struggle, it's not like there's no effort, because there is.
Right.
It's just that there's no like unnecessary suffering.
Yes.
Within that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And also, but I mean, it's also seen a bit differently from my viewpoint, because it's, I don't attribute it to any particular type of success other than like a true peacefulness with life and acceptance of life, which is essentially desireless.
Right.
From the typical viewpoint of desire.
Yeah.
Not that desires don't manifest, but it's not
an urgent need.
Yeah, or it's just not something that's of any concern, like it just it happens and it's appreciated.
Right.
Like, oh, there's warmth, great.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's not like it's not this like urgent kind of topic, at least. And that's what I noticed with living in that more desireless space, or experiencing it more consistently. That's where all the synchronicities happen. Right. Because then nothing's in the way. You know what I mean? You have no expectations or ideas about the way things need to look or happen. Right. Other than like what is actually essentially meant to happen. on a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not even to play into like a destiny card too much, but it kind of is that, because the things that are aligned to occur, at least within that like micro timeline, because I think timelines are malleable.
Sure.
So you could have like a macro timeline of like your destined path, but then there's micro timelines that can shift based on choices. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of saw it where, because for a while, and I guess it still creeps up on some level, where there could be like, okay, well, is this the right choice? Is that the right choice? And then the look to symbols or synchronicities will give that reinforcement. But if synchronicity is happening all the time, then it doesn't actually even matter if you go left or right.
Right.
Because the synchronicities are going to happen whether you're on this side of the planet or this side of the planet.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, then you're left with yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
like you're with nobody but yourself.
Yeah.
So, but that's a beautiful freedom, because then, yeah, it shows that the weight, I guess the weight thing come back to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the weight of a choice is not usually as heavy as we deem it to be.
Yes.
Especially if we're attached to ideas like destiny or fulfilling a purpose,
Right.
or not making a mistake.
Yes.
Because then you're like, well, if I go left and it was supposed to be right, then what? I just fucked up the destiny. You know, it's like, well, no, that's not.
Right. That's not it.
It's not really how it's happening.
Yeah.
And but if it is, like, say it is, where it really is a choice of, then it was like the universe will or you or whatever will reveal itself so clearly, like, you know what I mean, like as clear as it possibly can to tell you, no, it's this, or you know what I mean.
Yes.
So you'd be like, it's almost impossible either way to even go against it.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see
yeah.
it.
Like it almost doesn't matter which choice you pick.
Yeah.
In a sense, right? And yeah, I remember one thing that I've told some of my clients was to, well, first is that to recognize that really what decision they make, that's the one they're supposed to make. Doesn't matter. Right? So it's just like, you know, do it and then go with it. And then the second thing is I asked them the question is that, what if it was like a given, like 100% chance that you were gonna be successful, right? You were gonna make it. You were gonna get to this contentment, this peace, and feel at home, have everything that you ever wanted, and right? Would you really spend all this time, you know, studying self-development and thinking that you gotta accumulate all this knowledge and have to do all these projects and you know what I mean? This sort of like frantic running from within. Would you and also recognizing that every phase is supposed to get you to another phase, right? And to
pretty much, or
right?
at least like reveal like the eternal nature, like,
right,
you know.
yes And so it's always like layers upon layers or phases upon phases, but there seems to be a thing where people get stuck on a certain phase, right? Like the tool that got you from A to B is not going to be necessarily the tool that gets you from B to C, right? But you can feel so grateful for that tool that got you from A to B that you get attached to it, right? And so you stop seeing anything else.
Yeah.
And I think I see a lot of people like stuck in that.
Yeah. Well, on the positivity note, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to even like relate on this now, because I don't come across like that many anymore.
Right.
But I do remember or do observe at times where people, I guess I've come full circle with it, because it's like, okay, you start in that like, law of attraction, you know, positive, everything, don't talk about anything negative, you know, don't acknowledge negative. Then you go through the phase of actually starting to acknowledge it,
right?
You know, which could be a combination of all kinds of things. Then it becomes kind of like too much of the dark side,
the shadow.
Yeah. Like I was reflecting, I see people, which I've done as well. I remember I've shared this openly, where I remember I went through a phase where I tried to find like all the dirt on every teacher I ever listened to.
Okay.
And it was actually a very grounding experience on one level, because I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to put them on a pedestal, because there literally is dirt on every single one. But then second, it's like, okay, well then why do I feel the need so strongly to go and look for the faults of others?
Right.
That was a reflection of me. So I'm like, okay, well then that has to be dropped. So then you kind of go through that, but like in that reflection, that's what I observed. That's another group where people are like calling out dark this, fallen angelic this,
Yes.
distorted that, like everywhere, especially in the Christic Kaolonic science community, because we're so aware of things that it's so easy to pick out like any possible imperfection, you know what I mean?
Right.
But it's still based on some ideal that you're not even really living yet anyways.
Yes.
Because if you were, you wouldn't really have any time to engage in that. Or you would just, it's not that, it's more of it's a different energy. Like, I remember, like, Ashiana, when she was doing Kaolonic workshops, there was times where, like, you can feel the kind of, like, stuck-upness a little bit. But most of the time, it was just, like, calling a spade.
Right.
It's just like, that's what it is. Like, there's nothing,
Right.
we're not like going off about it. But then you can feel I felt it in myself, or I've observed it, where it comes off as this like holier than thou vibe, or just like it's really condescending, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Like the actors, like their shit don't stink.
Yeah. And like this passive aggressive type, or like
Right.
it's essentially another version of cancel culture.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's in the most advanced of spiritual circles. So
Yeah.
So then you go through that. Then you go through actually coming into a real abiding peace. Because even in that, you're pretty like peaceful, but you're still in that kind of like whatever
Okay.
vibe, I find. But then you come into like a real stabilization in peace or awakening,
Okay.
which I find is not positive or negative. It's not even neutral. It's just peace. It's you're at peace with things. You can see the perfection and everything, and yet you can still see the spade and the diamond. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. You can see the perfection and the imperfection and the
in the
quote, unquote,
relative
yes.
sense. But yet then it's all a part of source. It's all part of the one.
Right.
And that's an actual known reality, not like oneness as in everything's equal, everything like the pillow is also this, you know what I mean? Like it just becomes really impractical.
Yeah.
And that's what people are afraid of, is when they intellectually think oneness, they think
Yes.
I'm hanging out with the murderer just as much as I'm hanging out with my good friend. And it's like, no, it's not, that doesn't mean that's what's gonna happen. You know? Like,
I mean, from my experience, it's just that you feel this natural compassion towards the murderer as you would to your best friend, right? And that it's just not something like, you know, I don't have to like muster up or think about how to be compassionate to the murderer, let's say, at that if I see him. It just naturally comes about.
Yeah.
And I don't give him that, but I don't give him that attention, right? And I do hang out with the best friend more, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's you're right. And I think a lot of people have that sort of distorted vision of oh well, then if everything's equal, then being poor is like being rich, and there's no point in having a business, and that's where like business and spirituality don't mix, and and it's all these false ideas.
Yeah. It's just holding on to a million different ideas, pretty much. And, because I mean, the most adept people I know are just fairly grounded, peaceful, neutral about the majority of things. It's not that they don't feel. If not, they feel more than anyone else I know. And because they feel so much, they're silent more in that, you know, because they're feeling it. They're not like, like talking about it, or like, again, because then, again, the coming full circle that I was mentioning is actually coming back to, it's almost like you cycle it through it like infinitely now, because you're not just like attached to positivity, no, you're attached to like acknowledging like pessimism, or, you know, like things that are not maybe so pretty here on this planet, but you're but then it kind of does come back to like positivity.
I mean, yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
At our state sort of now, it's just like every moment is a celebration, you know, like every day is just sort of like wee, you know, so
yeah, it pretty much is that, without having to reaffirm it, like
yes, and I think that's the difference, is that you don't have to reaffirm it, it's just there naturally.
Yeah, natural is probably the best term, you know?
Yeah.
It's not a... Because, yeah, like, like, you see, I remember it was actually on the weekend when I was at the group and they were saying, like, oh yeah, you look like the kind of, like, crypto, like long hair, you know what I mean? Like, she's, like,
Sure.
naming a bunch of, like, these terms.
Yes.
And I'm like, I was laughing so much because that literally is what I like make fun of at times. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where it's like someone using all those words in the same like sentence. You know what I mean? Like like all the keywords. And I laughed so much because I remember actually I posted a while ago where like I made a joke about I actually made a joke where I posted something and it had all the terms like in one, and it was like making fun of the idea of like needing to use all these terms like in an incomprehensible way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
it just And I've noticed that because then someone commented like, yeah, that's literally how you write, and I'm like, and I use it as a reflection. So I'm like, wait a minute. Even though that's he was kind of just like poking at me.
Yes.
There was this reflection of like continuing to deepen into the clarity of how like words are used.
Right.
Where because I don't like when I write now, it's true I do use a lot of like catch terms, but it doesn't feel like it's like this forced. Maybe on some levels like it could like maybe I'm trying to come up with a post or something, but the majority of the things that I post now, because I spend so much time writing, and when I post something, I've literally spent a lot of time refining even the slightest of words sometimes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's why I find it most of my stuff tends to do fairly well in regards to people, even people who are not so into things, still understanding what's because the wording is not too far off, but it's still it holds the energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm just pulling words to like make it sound more spiritual. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's always an energy thing because you can feel that when you're at like a gathering and someone's using all the terms and it's clearly like they're just pulling it out of a box kind of thing.
Right.
Or like a tarot deck or something.
Yeah.
Oh, it's acceptance, appreciation, awakening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Oh, how are you? You know, just layers of ego death with shadow work and tarot cards.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's innocent, but it's not at the same time. It's coming with this kind of agenda of like presentation, you know?
It is, yeah. It's coming with the agenda of presentation to get the applause and feel accepted. That's really all it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's it.
And I think at this stage in my life at least is like I don't have that sort of like presentation thing, and so it seems obviously very like comedic to me that when somebody's presenting that, it's sort of like how Ramaji, our teacher, says is like they're in a chicken suit insisting that they're chickens.
Yeah.
Right. And we see that they're in the suit. We see that they're the human being inside that chicken suit. So you know, we just go along with it, and we're like, okay, cool. Like this is what you want to do.
Yeah, it's very much that. Yeah. I find that too. Where I mean, you're 3/6, I'm a 6/3, so it's a different dynamic. But I experience the 6/3 vibe like pretty much like this, where I'll be engaged in something for a certain time. Or like say I'm sharing, even the idea of sharing on social media where like I'll be really interested in that and I'm like down and I'm like engaged and then it'll just like shut off. Or I find it's also when I go on like these trips, like past 2-3 days I've been just traveling, whatever, where it's like I don't care at all. Like social media, it's like doesn't even exist to me. It's really interesting because I've spent so much time on it. When I'm not on it, I really notice the difference. Right. Where like life feels like a movie. Like I feel like I'm just traveling a movie life and going to all these different things, even though nothing is that extravagant. Right. And it feels so fulfilling. And then I go back to social media and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is so shitty. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's not, because I've enjoyed it a lot, but it has to be so balanced because like even the idea of getting approval or you know these things, it can be so manipulated so easily to become a new norm. Where it's like, okay, well I just gotta post today because I gotta get my social like hidden essentially because if I'm not seeing people, I'm not you know what I mean? Right. So that's been really fascinating to me actually because it's I think for myself and for any
but he really lived. The reason self-awareness is so important is because you can't get enough of what you don't need. Right? Yeah. So, I mean, if you go to a homeless man and like hand him a business and be like, cool, like what am I gonna do with this? He's worried about his next meal.
Yeah.
Right? Or if you are you need something sweet, but you're constantly having something salty. No matter how much salt that you have, it's not gonna crave the sweet tooth that you have.
Yeah.
Right? So through my own journey of self-awareness, I've come to sort of pinpoint certain things of like, on the food topic, one thing that you mentioned is like, if I'm angry, then that's when I crave something crunchy, because that signifies the destruction. If I'm craving something sweet, that's when I know I need some literally like sweetness in my life and some love and nurture. So similarly to social media, is if I find myself too much on social media, I recognize that I'm craving a social connection.
Yeah, totally.
Right? That no matter how much time I spend on social media, I'm not going to get. And that the interaction with another human being is what's going to satisfy that itch.
Yeah. Well, it's like you can only take it so far. That's what I noticed. Because it definitely can fulfill some elements, I find. Sure. Like, I find when I get into a place of, like, actual conscious... Like, it's mainly DMs. And, like, I'm really engaged in, like, the conversations.
Yeah.
Like, I could go hours and I feel like a pretty expanded...
Yeah.
Like, I get in a pretty expanded state. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I'm just chatting with people, maybe a quick, like video call or...
Yeah.
And I could just go and, like, it's quite profound. The other thing I found this related to is I talked about this in a recent video. I don't know if it'll be posted by the time that this goes up, but it's in relation to the PHS in human design, like the personal health system.
Oh,
because you know the determination, how we're like, because I think you're primal appetite, right? Hunter diet.
I think so.
But alternating.
Alternating.
Yeah, so I'm consecutive. But do you know your environment? Because mine's narrow valleys. Do you remember yours?
Valleys as well. Cities and valleys, yeah.
Do you remember if it's narrow or wide? It probably won't make much of a difference.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that, like, it'll be better for me in a city rather than, like...
Well, yeah, so what I've been learning about this is that... Well, I always knew that the higher hexagrams, meaning the valleys particularly, and then I think mountains and potentially shores, where it doesn't necessarily always need to be a... physical valley. Like, you can recreate that experience by way of a couple of things. So one for instance is like headphones, where like, because it's more so about the auditory, at least for me, the narrow valley. It's about direct auditory. So like one-to-one conversations is always better than when I'm like chatting with
yes.
you know.
Okay.
Headphones always better than listening to it.
Right.
Like a distant speaker.
Okay.
Because I when I'm here, I feel like I'm in that.
Yes.
Right? So I noticed the same thing was actually being replicated in Facebook groups and in DMs.
Oh.
Because it's concentrated,
right,
like topics, and I actually feel like safe and like again, it's like this auditory enclosed.
Yes.
So it was mind blowing, because I'm like,
wow,
how deep that element and environment goes.
Yeah.
Versus someone who like needs like a natural shore where they literally should be like on the ocean shore or something
right.
like that, you know, or they can,
right.
or where they can see the distance of the next environment compared to where they are.
Right.
So so yeah, details like that I started like getting into, where, and I noticed that even being in Montreal, where I did a whole video about it, where like everyone's all up about like EMF and 5G and, you know, noise pollution, all that. But for me, I actually feel like pretty dope in Montreal, like walking around.
Okay.
Because I'm getting that sense of stimulation.
Right.
And I could be in the same states of expansion.
Do you think that's part of the 3 though? Like, I heard that the 3 energy wants that stimulation. That variety of experiences.
Yeah, experiences I think is important too. So it could on some level there, yeah.
Okay.
But I noticed specifically with this element, it's pretty clear to me how that
right
is kind of manifesting, but online or offline. But sure, it's like the organic experience of the human connection is so profound, and it reminds me how like I was talking to Josh about this a while ago on a live where we were talking about like when I was sharing about my psychedelic experiences with marijuana in the past, where I would do like closed-eye journeys versus open-eyed, and how the open-eyed ones were mainly because the energies were too powerful that I couldn't close my eyes. I was too afraid.
Wow.
And so I would just like go about my life, and I would just have these journeys like of activating all these things like a superhero movie.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I've been observing the nature.
Can you expand on that? What do you mean, like activating things?
Well, like superpowers, like psychic vision, or being able to like read someone's mind that I'm looking at, you know, or change what they're gonna think or how they're gonna deal with me or something like that.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
It was more like personal development-y, so it was more manipulative back then.
Yes.
Right? Or going back to how, like, I found those states when I used to go out in the whole like pickup scene, when I would get into like a flow state.
Yeah.
Like I could like any social interaction, I could navigate how I wanted it to go.
Right.
Pretty much, you know what I mean?
Right.
Which of course could be on some level manipulative, which a lot of that personal development stuff can be. You know what I mean? Because it's but it's also like it's also just a magnetism. Like
that's what I was
the bigger
about to say.
magnet wins over the smaller magnet.
Yes.
You know, so
is that you're in that flow state, and like people wanna go on that ride with you. Right?
Essentially, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things you could say about it. But at least from a place like where I'm in now, where that's kind of how I'm observing like the online like social media worlds, where like I could just sit at home and talk to people or post and shit, but then feel like pretty unfulfilled at the end of the day.
Right.
Versus like moving about and going to like see people physically and go to different places and just synchronistically move through all these realms. Like it feels like there's no time. It's just moving. Like I don't know how to explain it. It's all the only way I can explain it is it reminds me of that superhero-esque vibe that those psychedelic experiences I had with my eyes open, because everything was like conforming to the will, essentially.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's now I don't experience it as that personal will that I'm imposing. It's a synchronistic like we were saying,
dance
everything
with the world.
Yeah, where everything you're just it's like that Lao Tzu quote I posted today, where the last sentence is once you realize it, you don't have to do anything to maintain it, you just have to participate in it.
Right.
Like the absolute reality, or you know, the harmonious oneness, as he calls it. That's how I find it now, where like coming back into the world with the awakening or the awareness of all these powers that we do have access to, that then get infused in real time. Because like by no real product of your own, your will, it's just happening, like the miracle healing of Jesus kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where it's just, because that's literally that's the only explanation, everything like just being this manifested miracle for all the synchronicities that I perceive in a day. Like compared to like when I was 16, where I would see a synchronicity once every couple of months.
Right.
Like perceive like the numbers, it was 444 I kept seeing.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like I don't. It's all the time. There's not. They just. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just.
You called me today at 222, by the way. I don't know.
Oh,
if
there you go.
realized.
Yeah. So it's such an afterthought, right?
Yes. It's become so common that it's like, really. Yeah.
And I know a lot of people can relate to that, but but if you don't let go of them, where you're still thinking about them and thinking about needing to create them, then that's what gets in the way. Versus literally just continuously participating in reality, without getting caught up in lower desires, essentially. Because part of that too is when I go on these runs, I'm like dry fasting almost the whole time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm like the whole thing is just this meditation. It's not just the dry fasting, but it's this whole, you know, cohesive.
Right.
But I do find like the fasting and the intimacy is like so important.
And the intimacy of, you mean just people?
Connections, yeah.
Connection, okay.
Like literally, I'll notice where, like, I'm done. Like as soon as I'm done, like say like a hangout with someone, or I'm like, it's almost like instant response. Like okay, like I can go to the grocery store now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like you go home, you're gonna go eat.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like so, the only way for it not to occur, I noticed, was like, well, firstly, no judgment, because I don't care if I go and eat something.
Sure.
But it's like the continual connection. Not in like a codependent state, but in a state where like, what else is there to do but to just go and connect with people and be of service? Whether you're meditating in silence or we're speaking like this.
Yeah.
Like, what else are we really wanting to do?
Right. What's a better use of your time?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Other than, like, okay, the other use of the time is to do all those practices alone.
Sure.
But it's just to have the community helps with everything, I find.
Yeah, I agree.
The right people, right? Not just any random person, but yeah.
Yeah. True. And there's a certain readiness that the people have to have, an openness. You know, one of the things that I've come to realize as I've gotten older is not to just really follow any role model, right? Like when you're younger, you just see like, oh, he's successful? Like, what do you have to say, right? He's happy? What do you have to say, right? So rather than just looking at that, going like, okay, what are their values? Would I want to trade life with that person? Is there like similarities in the outlook, right? Where they're like prioritizing joy and peace and living that kind of life. If not, don't listen to them, because there's a million other people that have those values and priorities, and you would just be fighting against the grain if you're going on that kind of path and listening to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Because everything, I mean, if everything is treated as, or like, it's not everything is treated as, but like that divine perfection or the that one reality or whatever is actually known, or it, like you're coming to see it. Maybe it's not this binary thing, but really it's rooting. Then everything can be a teaching. Everything can be an opportunity for like some growth or some spark or like an inspiration or a light post, or like it's literally endless. So again, if there's all this like just like ideas of this is right, this is wrong, this is for me, not for me, this is the best teacher, worst teacher, this person, oh, they did this one thing, so I can't listen to them ever again.
Right.
You know, or again on the other end, they did this one thing and now they're the absolute best.
Yes.
It's like constant like emotionally charged like decision making that limits the ability to like just be receiving, because it's again the receptivity. That video I did recently in the forest. It was like such a reminder. I've been in that space for a while, but that couple of days I was like constantly being reminded of the silence of like receiving, or being in that receptive state and listening, like truly listening to everything that's around, you know, and all the things, all the sensations. It's like there's so many sounds, sensations, symbols, perspectives. Like there's so much going on. Right. You know what I mean? Like that. Right. What? Yeah.
Yeah. It's the equivalent of like being overstimulated in the movie theaters and like having popcorn and the best orgasm ever, right? But it's at the same time.
I just had an image, like you're like in the movie theater with the popcorn, having an orgasm, like it's like a 15-year-old with a girlfriend or something. Like, I never had those. Well, I guess I have.
Neither did I.
Reina was probably the first person I ever brought on like a movie date. So I guess but it wasn't like, it was like trying to hold hands. Or like, or like I got like touched and I was like,
what's happening?
I remember when I got her number in first year in university. It was like I was like immediately texting my friend after like, yo, I think it happened.
It's so good. There's this comedian, Louis C.K. He goes like 9 times out of 10, like when a guy is like getting laid, he's like, oh my god, it's happening.
I think that's actually like the wording I had in my mind. I think the first time I ever engaged in this type of, you know.
Yeah.
Probably multiple times, like first kiss, first this, first.
Right, of course.
Like, it's actually happening. Oh my god.
Yeah, but to bring it back, is that like I feel instead of one of the secrets, let's say to secrets to fulfillment or happiness or whatever you want to call it, is to recognize that instead of wanting everything and to accumulate and to be this overstimulation and driving the best car and having all these things, is to tune in to the subtlety, right? It's like if you're a very basic example that anybody can follow is that the difference between a healthy person and an unhealthy person is like an unhealthy person is like, well, I just want to taste it, all the sweets, all the all the, you know, all the variety, be overstimulated with my taste palates. Whereas, you know, for me, people are like, oh, you eat healthy all the time, like how do you do that? I'm like, to me it's enjoyable because my taste palates are so attuned to the subtlety that like eating a salad is like eating Pringles, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, these like crunchy chips.
Yeah.
So and it goes to like every other area of life. It's just, you know, being with somebody and being so attuned to the subtlety of what you're feeling that you're not thinking that it's not good enough, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually a point that they use with the hunter diet, because I was learning more about it, like whether it's consecutive or alternative, it's really about like only one ingredient at a time, not like rice with like salt.
Right.
It's literally like you eat the rice and then you eat the salt, or you eat the broccoli, or you know, and then for you you're going back and forth. For me it's like, for you it's actually even a little bit easier because you can kind of like still combine.
Dance with it, yeah.
But then consecutive is like way more like different. It's not like I'm saying I follow it all the time, but one of the elements that they were saying about it is that when you really focus in on like that one ingredient, your taste buds actually start to like really rewire. And I know this from all my time with the fruit, where like my whole childhood I didn't like 3/4 of the foods I eat now I couldn't stand when I was a young kid, like including a lot of the fruits that are generally quite sweet, but like, I mean, not only has the fruit been completely diminished in its taste quality, you know, in these times, but still, when you really start to like, like the taste palate heals, literally your tongue heals. Yeah. You taste everything like so much more deeply, so it is actually fulfilling to like just eat the broccoli, right? You know, the steamed broccoli. Well, it goes back to social media. I have noticed the effect of social media on the brain, especially like in regards to like attention and focus. Yes. Like I certainly have been noticing, if I'm not like cognizant. Yes. It's so easy to start darting, like I'm on Amazon and I'm typing a Instagram post and I'm like, I was like, what the? Yeah, I like made up a saying, if you will, like recently, where it's don't watch reels or TikToks. Read Instagram posts. Don't read Instagram posts. Read Facebook posts. Don't read Facebook posts. Read blogs. Don't read blogs. Read books. Yeah, you know, and so on. It's like to say that, like, practice your attention span, right? Whatever you practice at, you get good at. And what's happening now with social media is everything is shorter and shorter and shorter attention span. So basically everybody has ADD or ADHD, but it's just because simply they haven't practiced that attention, and so because they haven't practiced that muscle, they don't have. It's become a self-limiting belief, like, oh, I just have ADHD, like that's become their identity. Yeah. You know what I mean? Lack of focus. Yeah, I mean that is the foundation to all meditation, like concentration. You know, like, right. It's literally not, whether you want to practice meditation or not, or you want to become meditation. Yes. Either one requires you to be able to concentrate. Right. Right. But on the other end, on the like the real TikTok vibe, I do see the other side of it being able to be more efficient. like making us more efficient in getting points across, or like transmitting something.
Right.
But there's always a balance. There's always a a limit to how.
Yeah. Well, there's a beauty to somebody like a Lao Tzu, right?
Yeah.
Where what they're saying is so like vague and it's captivating. It almost doesn't even matter what they say. It's how you internalize it, and it's so like deep and profound and layers to it. Yet it's only one sentence. So there's definitely like a very profound thing with just shortening something and making it more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see that more and more.
Yeah.
Again, it's not even listening to a female person, it's listening to the mother, like the feminine essence, like being receptive to, because I find more and more now, again, it's not really painting any picture about listening to this or that, but I find more and more I'm simply noticing everyone is out for the better good of my own experience. Because if everything is simply me coming in contact with me, then it's not like removing yourself from your own individual discernment and then they have their own discernment, but it's recognizing like everything is of support of my own unfolding.
Right.
You know what I mean? So listening to that more and more and not resisting, like when things just naturally spontaneously arise, you know, and then you're like, even today was this perfect example. You call me, and then I'm like down, and I know I'm down, but then I'm like, oh wait, what about the insurance?
Right.
Which is a valid concern.
Sure.
But that, in my view, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like those ways in which we kind of like put the brakes.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But you already know the answer is.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny. Like even on that note, like, I think I was like thinking of calling you, and then my dad was like, oh, why don't you call that person? Because my father's association is the culture more.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've come to realize like nobody gives more joyously than an awakened person. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Like it's just like the path of least resistance. You know, like if somebody's like listening, like you want a favor, like ask either one of us.
It's true.
Watch our DMs blow up. Like I need 10K.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just another way of the mind takes a hold of something.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because that's literally what I see it to be. It's just living life through the natural fluidity of what is.
Yeah.
Which could be translated into living through the body more.
Right.
Not just the body, because the brain's obviously a part of the body.
Sure.
So it doesn't make sense to say it's not the brain, but it's a cohesive, like, full body effort.
There isn't the breaks of the mind.
Yeah.
Right. Like yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I came to this like realization like while I was driving here. I was like you know, I had called like all these people before, and you could see that they're not really like, they're giving, but they're not given. They're sort of given out of like, that's the right thing to do, or that's the chore, or sure, and so because there isn't that full throttle giving, that's just like oozing out.
Yeah.
You know, that overflowing cup that is just naturally giving. Things don't align, right? Whereas today you're just like you were like an hour away, for God's sake, you know. And you still came and everything and everything still manifested pretty effortlessly.
Yeah, that's it. It's always just the effortless flow. So it has to be from the body. It's like there's no ideals.
Right.
Like there's no commandments necessarily, although there's principles that we follow.
Yeah.
Like the virtues. I always come back to that. You know that virtue diagram I shared? The colored wheel?
The colored wheel. No.
There's these 12 virtues, and it comes from the Kanaan system, and that's like the closest thing I view to be the true commandments.
Okay.
It's just like, and it's actually an encryption with a code and a tone.
Right.
Which represents like love, effective action, communion.
Okay.
Power, not patience, but enlightenment.
Okay.
Intimacy.
I'm surprised power is one of them.
power is like the will, like the true,
the
true
willpower.
Will, you know what I
Okay.
mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's 12 of them, and each of them has like a certain encryption, and I always come back to them because literally that wheel, like it's a mandala, and the mandala has all the codes and all the tones, and that wheel is literally an aspect of our anatomy. So the basic premise behind this is if you don't have a certain quotient of these realized, you cannot pass through a Stargate in Ascension. Like you literally
it's
have
like a video game. Collect this badge.
Literally, yeah.
Okay.
Like it's like if you like to create a certain substance, you need the certain elements. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If you don't have that combination of elements, you cannot create it.
Right.
So that's literally what these encryptions of the commandments originally were.
Yeah.
It's like a breakdown of your actual